The summer of 1991 saw the release of Warner Bros.' hugely successful film, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which starred Kevin Costner, Morgan Freeman, and Alan Rickman. On a budget of $48 million, the film would go on to gross almost $400 million at the box office, making back half of its budget in its opening weekend alone. Acknowledging a large gap between the PG and R ratings in the United States, the American censors, the MPAA, had introduced the PG-13 rating in 1984, following a suggestion from director Steven Spielberg. The BBFC in the UK was slower to catch on. Prior to the summer of 1989, no British rating equivalent existed. This was rectified in August of 1989, when the 12 certificate was introduced for cinema classification, although unlike the PG-13 rating, the 12 was legally restricted and did not admit any cinemagoers under the age of 12. It would be almost half a decade before the 12 rating would be adapted for video in the UK, which came into force on July 1, 1994. Seeing the potential for larger box office takings from a family audience, Warner Bros. Wanted to secure a PG rating in the UK for their release of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. The film was submitted to the BBFC for theatrical classification, but the board felt that the film was too strong for PG, and minor cuts were requested for a theatrical release. Initially, only 2 reels were cited as problematic, these being Reel 1 and Reel 7. The first cut requested was to the opening scene.
Show them the courage of Allah.
The BBFC requested to the distributors,
reduce terror and violent atmosphere in dungeon by removing first 14 seconds after townscape caption. Prisoner's scream, shot of his back covered in bloody lash marks, and strapping of his hand to block, resuming on scimitar blade about to descend, leaving an atmospheric opening without the terror and details of torture which precede it.
After these cuts, the only indication of violence that remained consisted of a brief and undetailed sight of the prisoner's hand coming off, and his final scream of pain. The only other change requested by the BBFC for theatrical release was the removal of the film's sole use of the word fuck, ad-libbed by Christian Slater towards the end of the film. Hollywood filmmakers continue to insert the word into certain films to secure the cooler PG-13 rating in the United States when they feel that a PG rating will seem too childish to older filmgoers. So the words "fuck me" in the line
Fuck me, cleared it.
were redubbed to the tamer "blimey" for the UK version. Following these changes, the film was passed with a PG rating by the BBFC on July 4, 1991, after 14 seconds of cuts. Later that year, Warner Bros. Submitted the pre-cut cinema version to the BBFC for home video classification. After receiving numerous complaints from parents about the suitability of the film's PG rating, the BBFC decided that heavier cuts were needed before a video certificate could be issued. The first change applied to the UK video version was to the opening scene, which was reduced even further from the cinema version, removing all sight of the prisoner's amputated hand dangling on the rope after it has been cut off, as well as a close-up of the man screaming. A minute or so later, the initial sight of the guard falling onto the coals and catching fire was retained. But the following shot of him rolling off of the coals and screaming was removed. About 20 minutes into the film, Robin fights Guy of Gisborne's men, striking one of them in the face with his crossbow. The tail end of a shot showing the soldier's bloody face was removed. Following Robin's fight with Little John in the river, Robin helps Little John out of the water. Little John's remark of "I'll be buggered" was eliminated from the film. Around 20 minutes later, the Sheriff of Nottingham kills his cousin, Guy of Gisborne. A close-up of the Sheriff's sword entering Guy's belly with the oozing of blood was removed. The Sheriff later consults his mother, the witch Mortiana, for advice. Using her nail, she cuts into her arm to draw blood as part of a ritual. The close-up of this act was removed for the UK video version. A few minutes later, one of the sheriff's men attacks Marion.
I've never seen the breasts of a noble woman.
His sexual threat to her was reduced, cutting straight to Marion, throwing sand in his face. As part of the sheriff's macabre wedding celebration with Marion, he arranges to have some of Robin's outlaw friends hanged in the grounds of Nottingham Castle. After the hanging begins, 3 shots of Little John's son, Wolf, choking on his noose were removed for the UK version. Minutes later, the sheriff is eager to consummate his marriage to Marion. As he struggles with her on the floor, the sheriff forces Marion's legs apart with his own.
The Son and the Holy Ghost.
The UK video version removed the sight of Marion's legs being spread
In the name
apart.
of the Father, the Son.
Robin then fights the sheriff to the death, the fight ending with Robin stabbing the sheriff in the chest. The BBFC demanded 2 specific changes to this scene, stating,
Remove sight of dagger being pulled out of Sheriff's chest by cutting final frames of shot, and reduce sight of blood-covered dagger in his hands before he drops it to the floor.
As a result, the sheriff's death is over with slightly quicker in the UK video version. Seconds later, another cut occurs when the supposedly dead Mortiana rises to lunge at Robin. The sight of her bloody face was eliminated in the cut version. Following the above changes, this censored version was passed with a PG rating by the BBFC for video on November 18, 1991. On top of the 14 seconds of cinema cuts made before the UK video submission, the total amount of missing footage when compared to the uncut version of the film now totaled around 32 seconds. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was resubmitted to the BBFC a few years later, with all of the UK cinema and video cuts made. This version of the film was in widescreen and featured closed caption subtitles, and the BBFC requested one further cut totaling 3 seconds before a PG certificate would be issued.
When Little John chases Will Scarlet and throws him to the ground, revealing lash marks on his body, remove John's exclamation, "Bugger me," including closed captions.
Bugger me.
God. Let him speak. Let him speak.
With this cut made, the film was passed with a PG rating on May 11, 1995. The BBFC's director, James Furman, would later retire from the BBFC in 1999. He would go on to state that his one regret during his time as the board's chief censor was passing Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with a PG rating. The cut version of the film would be the standard version available to British consumers on both VHS and DVD until the extended version was released in 2004. This new edit of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves reinstated previously deleted but non-contentious footage. The extended version had been released on DVD in the United States as unrated, i.e. without an MPAA rating, in June of 2003, and this version of the film, which contained none of the original BBFC cuts, was submitted to the BBFC later that year. Quite a few years had passed since the BBFC's initial decisions about the film, and with James Furman having left the board 4 years prior, new classification guidelines based on public consultation were now in place. Warner Bros. Wanted to once again secure a PG rating for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, but despite a new BBFC director and new BBFC guidelines, the film still needed to be cut before a PG rating was awarded. As the BBFC state in their records for the extended version's submission,
cuts required too violent detail, strong language, hanging, and sexual assault detail in order to maintain previous PG category in accordance with the Video Recordings Act 1984, BBFC guidelines and reclassification policy.
the first cut demanded of Warner Bros. Stated,
In opening sequence, remove sight of man's face in agony, his bloody back, and his hand strapped and dragged over the anvil, resuming on scimitar being raised.
This change effectively replicates the original UK cinema cuts. The next change mirrored the same cut requested for the 1991 video release.
Remove sight of chef's sword penetrating man's stomach in close-up.
BBFC guidelines for PG at the time stressed the danger of imitable techniques, including various acts such as headbutts, lockpicking and hanging. As a result, the scene at the gallows in the grounds of Nottingham Castle was cut more heavily than the original UK video version. The BBFC now requested to Warner Bros. To
remove 8 medium/close shots of struggling boy hanging. Remove sight of struggling men hanging in long and medium shots.
As a result, footage of the hangman kicking the stools from underneath the outlaw's feet was cut, along with 2 further shots of the outlaws struggling as they hanged, footage which appeared intact in the original video releases in the 1990s.
with it! What are you waiting for? Get on with it!
Will Scarlett's strong language that was cut from the UK cinema and video versions was once again removed,
Why me? He cleared it.
as was the sight of the Sheriff of Nottingham forcing Marion's legs apart during the wedding ceremony. With these changes, the total amount of cuts to the extended version of Robin Hood Prince of Thieves totaled around 28 seconds, and the film was passed with a PG rating on October 7th, 2003. In comparison to the original UK video versions, numerous cuts were waived by the BBFC, including the end of the opening scene showing the prisoner's hand coming off, the guard rolling off of the hot coals, the bloody face of the enemy soldier after being struck with Robin's crossbow, Mortiana cutting her arm with her nail, the sexual threat to Marion by one of the sheriff's men, Little John's use of the word bugger, the Sheriff of Nottingham holding the knife after he is stabbed, the shot of Mortiana's bloody face as she rises to run at Robin. The censored extended version was released on DVD in the UK on January 26, 2004, with the BBFC consumer advice stating,
Contains moderate violence.
the extended version was resubmitted to the BBFC about 5 years later for a UK Blu-ray release, only this time with all of the previous cuts reinstated by Warner Bros. The BBFC passed the film uncut with a 12 rating on February 10, 2009, waiving all of their previous changes, with the consumer advice now stating,
Contains infrequent strong language and moderate violence.
Finally, after having to live with censored versions for 18 years, the British public could now own Robin Hood Prince of Thieves completely uncut. Unlike many director's cuts available on DVD and Blu-ray, however, the extended version does not come with an option to watch the original theatrical version of the film. At the time of writing, the original uncut theatrical version of Robin Hood Prince of Thieves has never been released in the UK on VHS, DVD or Blu-ray, although it is still available on DVD from some websites in the United States. Fans with the capability to play Region 1 DVDs may wish to track down this DVD, although the disc contains no special features and the picture quality is not of the highest standard.